Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us this week. Always so much going on in terms of government corruption here in Washington, D.C., and always so much going on in terms of Judicial Watch's activities to expose and hopefully stop it. There was significant court action I'll talk about in the Biden raid on Trump's home. A lot going on there. Judicial Watch took more court action to try to find out about the government corruption as it relates to protecting Hunter Biden. New information about the COVID vaccines, plus new information on Nancy Pelosi's husband and his arrest. So a lot to go through today. And let's begin with the beginning, which is the current crisis as it relates at least to government corruption, or at least the core part of it, is the Biden raid, the unjustified raid on the home of former President Trump that took place not too long ago. It was, they tell us, about getting presidential records and potentially classified information back. And as Judicial Watch has highlighted, based on our experience on a similar case related to Clinton's tapes of Bill Clinton conducting government business, including communications with foreign leaders, which are presumably classified, the Justice Department, the Biden administration, and the National Archives changed their minds, did a 180-degree spin to go after Trump for these records, when in fact, when we asked them to do that with President Clinton's records, they said, oh, you can't do that. In fact, the fact that he has them after he leaves office means they're presumably personal. And then they go ahead and take the completely opposite position and raid Trump's home. Now, President Trump has tried to highlight what I've called the Clinton sock drawer case, because he kept these tapes supposedly in his sock drawer with the lower courts and with the appeals court, because of course the government appealed, to bring you up to date, the special master ruling by Judge Cannon. And they appealed specifically the part of the ruling that restricted the Biden operation from using for a criminal investigation, or reviewing for a criminal investigation or any criminal investigation, the supposedly classified documents that they seized from Trump's home. Now, of course, the argument is, as Judge Cannon noted, well, are they classified or not, given the issues that Judicial Watch has raised, or that were raised in the Judicial Watch case, and that was brought to the attention of the court by Trump's team. Now, the appeals court overruled Judge Cannon on that specific matter. So the special master's continuing to look at the other documents to figure out what kind of documents they are or aren't. But the classified records for now will be kept from the court, will be kept from Trump, will be kept from the American people, which of course is very convenient and helpful to the Biden operation that has already leaked some of this material, or tried to describe some of this material, my guess is misleadingly, to news organizations, left-wing news organizations, and you can bet there'll be more leaks. And they'll be trying to launder the information through supposed briefings that are required of people like Adam Schiff in Congress. You know, so that's the situation we're facing. We're also facing a situation where the courts don't seem to understand the Presidential Records Act. Now, the Presidential Records Act, as explained by the court in the Clinton case that we pursued, and of course she was analyzing appellate court and Supreme Court cases about presidential records. The president is the decider in chief, and he gets to decide what are presidential records and what are personal records. And in the case of, let's say, Bill Clinton taking records with him after he left the White House, and they said, well, you know, we just presume they're personal. And the law, once that decision is made, gives no authority to the archives or anyone else in the federal government, the archives, the Justice Department, or the FBI, to second guess them. They don't have any criminal authority to go look and get those records, and they have no even civil authority to go and get those records, as Judicial Watch learned directly. Of course, the first rule of the Justice Department is to protect the Clinton gang and abuse Trump. So they changed their views on that and went after Trump. Now, Trump is trying to highlight this issue to alert the courts to it, but the appellate court wasn't terribly interested in it. I mean, one thing that the Trump team should be doing is that they should be more specific as they raise these issues in the courts. Meaning, it's one thing to say that you've got this Clinton sock drawer case out there and take a look at this. It's another thing to say that means these records are all personal. That means these records are all necessarily not classified and personal. That means all of these records are not, quote, presidential records. That decision's already been made by Trump, practically speaking, in that he has them. Now, of course, the left is mocking President Trump, even though, again, he's right. When he told Fox News' Sean Hannity earlier this week, is all he has to do is think about declassifying records, and they're declassified. And then he moves them, obviously, as it looks like was done when records were moved to Mar-a-Lago as he left office. And now the left is like joking, oh, you just can't think records to be. Of course, that's so dishonest. But what the president is saying is that he's reviewing records. He makes a mental note that I want to keep these as personal records. I'm putting them in this pile, and they're going down to my house. That's all that's required. So yeah, he can think that records are declassified, and as a result, him moving and shuffling the papers along to a certain pile, more or less, they become his. That's the reality of the law. And the courts don't want to grapple with it. They don't understand it. Judge Deary doesn't seem to understand it because Judge Deary, who is the special master who was appointed, and as I pointed out last week, Judge Deary is a senior judge up in New York. He's been around for a long time. He served on the FISA court. He approved, as I understand it, the fourth FISA warrant targeting Trump with this outrageous spying. You know, the cutout target was Carter Page, but the goal was to spy on Trump. He didn't question it. He held no hearing on it. And so what do you think Judge Deary's going to do when he's asked to, as he was initially asked to, figure out whether these records are classified or not? He's going to defer to the government, which it looks like he was presuming to do or getting ready to do until the appellate court ruled and took these records away from his jurisdiction. The same thing goes for the appellate court. They don't understand the Presidential Records Act. Now, supposedly there are two Trump appointees on this panel. It was a 3-0 decision, but I don't care. I mean, I dispute their analysis here. And I'm going to read you the key part here of this decision that the left is highlighting. Plaintiff suggests that he may have declassified these documents when he was president. Now, the plaintiff obviously is Trump. But the record contains no evidence that any of these records were declassified. And before the special master, plaintiff resisted providing any evidence he had declassified any of these documents. In any event, at least for these purposes, the declassification argument is a red herring because declassifying an official document would not change its content or render it personal. So even if we assume that the president did declassify some or all of the documents, they would not explain why he has a personal interest in them. And that was their analysis, meaning, well, he doesn't have a personal interest in them, so there's really no reason for the court to review them. Well, that's a fundamental understanding and kind of a logical fallacy of as it relates to the Presidential Records Act. The only way these records would have been, in my estimation, I shouldn't say the only way, the most likely way, and what's being argued here, is they would have been declassified in virtue of the fact they were in his possession and necessarily personal. So if they're personal, it means they're declassified. The Presidential Records Act assumes all these other records laws, including laws related to classified information. So the president could look at classified information, say, I want to keep this as a personal record, and it becomes declassified. And no one's allowed to second guess that. At least I don't understand how that could be second guessed under the law, and certainly the judge in the Clinton sock drawer case suggested that there was no way to second guess that. And she's one of the most liberal judges in the city up here in D.C. So do you understand, I hope, the kind of illogic and the failure to grapple with the Presidential Records Act? Now, some of that is they highlight, well, he didn't say he declassified them. Well, technically, he might have helped. And if I were Team Trump, I'd be really specific about these arguments as to why they apply to these specific documents. But they don't have to under this analysis of the law. And they've ignored that. They've ignored the application of the Presidential Records Act and his ability to make them personal or otherwise. So it was a judicial fail by the 11th Circuit in allowing the Biden operation to keep these so-called classified records secret still from the American people. Now, as Trump has suggested, and I've suggested, I'm convinced that this raid was as much about, there are lots of reasons, I think, for this illicit raid. And one of the reasons was they were concerned that Trump had the goods on them. Like shortly before he left office, he declassified certain Russiagate records that showed the corruption of the Justice Department and the FBI in the targeting of him under the Obama era and during the era of the ascendant deep state that was in control of the FBI and Justice Department that was targeting him even when he was president. And there were other records maybe related to Ukraine that were declassified. I don't know. He says maybe they were worried about Hillary Clinton. He's not saying I had Hillary Clinton's emails. He's just opining, President Trump was, as to what they were nervous about. And one way to ensure that records that are supposed to be declassified and should be potentially available to the American people are kept away is to come in and mislead the courts about the nature of the law and mislead the American people and mislead Congress by saying he had personal records he wasn't supposed to have, or classified records he wasn't supposed to have. Now, Judicial Watch, just shortly before they conducted this raid, we sued for the records he declassified about this Russiagate scandal just before he left office. Now, those records supposedly in large part were at the Justice Department. What better way to say, well, they're not really declassified, as to go and try to find him in his home and say they're classified again. So in many ways, this is a shell game, it looks to me, that the Biden operation is playing by using a false legal analysis to try to classify records or to suggest that records have always been classified when in fact that isn't the case. And of course, the side benefit of that is it puts Trump in legal jeopardy, or at least that's what they hope. So this is the rule of law crisis we're facing. And because Judicial Watch has understood that this scheme was afoot from the get-go, the media has been coming after us. We, back in February, and it's worth repeating, when I learned and Judicial Watch learned that the president had voluntarily turned over records that the National Archives had pretended were presidential records, I'm like, what? I said, what's happening here? This was a completely different legal position than they had beat us with previously on the Clinton sock drawer records. And I started calling attention to this. They're not presidential records, at least as way the Justice Department used to say, at least as the court said, at least as the National Archives said, and they had no business harassing you for them. That was our analysis, and I made that quite clear publicly. So we were fighting this and highlighting this, and then the media, after this raid takes place, they start reporting, that Tom Fitton was advising Trump to keep the classified records. Now, I'm not going to tell the media, and I'm not even going to tell you whether or not I've been, quote, advising Trump on anything. It's none of their business. But I've been quite public that, yes, he has a right to these records. They're personal records. And one solution he could have made, or a compromise, if he didn't want to kind of fight tooth and nail on this, was to turn the records over that were in dispute and then just resolve it in the civil context by going to the courts to assert his personal interest in them. But the left is just outraged that I've been telling the truth about this. And they're even more outraged that I might have been telling Trump about this. I mean, and that shows you how really desperate the left is. And of course, they're trying to say, well, Tom Fitton isn't a lawyer. Why is he talking to Trump about this? Or why is he even having an opinion on this? Well, first of all, Judicial Watch is a national watchdog organization that's been litigating records cases for 30 years. So, and of course, this is a policy and constitutional dispute, but I don't need to tell you that. I mean, it shows you how to touch the left would be, that somehow they think criticizing me for not being a lawyer actually persuades people of anything. I have a feeling that many of you probably think more highly of me because I'm not a lawyer. And that being said, Judicial Watch has a great staff of lawyers who do some of the most significant legal work and frankly, in modern history in terms of government accountability. Just to show you how desperate, MSNBC, I think, between two shows, spent 15 minutes attacking me in Judicial Watch. Helpfully, it looks like they even were quoting me, talking about all sorts of issues that they thought would be embarrassing to me. But I'm glad they quoted, because I think certainly viewers on MSNBC need to see it. I think we have a clip here we'll play.
So that's a guy named Tom Fitton. He's like a second, third tier conservative activist, head of the right-wing group Judicial Watch. They've been around for forever. Somewhat ludicrous figure, honestly. I'd put him in the Ginny Thomas category of the American right. Imagine a more senior James O'Keefe on steroids.
So as you can see from that clip, they're kind of crazed about this, aren't they? And, they're attacking me for not being a lawyer, attacking me based on my physical appearance, all very high quality arguments about what, while refusing to address the fundamental issue is, why did the Justice Department, why did the federal government change its position on presidential records to raid Trump's home? That a position now that would require them, for instance, to raid Clinton's home. And who knows how many other former presidents' homes, given their new analysis as to what constitutes records that presidents are allowed to have versus not allowed to have. So my view is the more the media talks about the Clinton sock drawer case and Judicial Watch's involvement in it, the better, because it will help educate more people and further expose the scam, sham, abusive raid on President Trump. And of course, the abuse continues. There's no president in the history of America that has faced more government corruption, abuse, and harassment than President Trump. We saw it with Russia. We saw it with the impeachment for Ukraine, for his daring to highlight the corruption of the Biden gang and Ukraine's involvement in the Russia smears against him and being concerned about corruption generally in Ukraine. I mean, they impeached him for doing his job. And then they had the smears related to January 6th. They impeached him again, even though he wasn't going to be president anymore. And none of that worked, right? So now we're with the raid. But that isn't even enough. That doesn't seem to be working. You had the politicized Attorney General in New York, Letitia James, who ran for office literally promising to target Trump. She came into office and said, I'm going to get Trump and I'm going to find something on him, which is the complete opposite of what prosecutors are supposed to ethically do, which is if they come across evidence of a crime, they go after someone. You don't go after someone and then find some evidence of a crime because you don't like them, is what they did with Trump. So they filed this absurd civil lawsuit against Trump and his family, his 3 children, over valuations, arguing with him over valuations he made in getting loans and with various banks, all of which the banks made money on, so there were really no victims there. It's a completely politicized attack on Trump. I mean, it was so bad, that press conference where she said yesterday or earlier this week, it's not the art of the deal, it's the art of the steal. I mean, how is that appropriate for a prosecutor to be making statements like that at a press conference? I mean, it was so political, I was surprised there wasn't a balloon drop and campaign signs. I mean, that's what that was about. I mean, and of course, this prosecution or this civil suit was filed a little bit over a month before elections. So once again, you had the election interference of the Biden raid on Trump's home, and then they follow that up, and of course, Letitia James, who probably has national aspirations in the Democratic Party, well, I'm going to get in on this. Let's sue Trump based on these trumped up civil fraud charges over real estate valuations. And by the way, if that's the new standard by which a New York Attorney General or anyone can come after a citizen, if that's the kind of the low standard, none of you are safe. Every mortgage application you have can be examined by some federal bureaucrat or state bureaucrat or prosecutor out to get you. And you get one number wrong, it's fraud. That's the theory here. So it's never going to stop for Trump. It's never going to stop. And similarly, Judicial Watch is never going to stop opposing and highlighting this. This is not about whether one likes Trump's specific policy proposals and such, and we can always have debates about that, and I got my views, other people have their views. This is about whether or not someone who is politically inconvenient to people in power is going to be targeted and harassed, have his civil rights violated in egregious ways. Not because he did anything wrong, but because he has the wrong political outlook. And by defending Trump, we're defending everyone and rising to the occasion in terms of making sure that our government is unable to abuse anyone. And when that happens, we call it out. I tell you, if you're a Republican or Democrat and you're a political office holder, I don't trust this Justice Department to do anything apolitically. I mean, there's always a political component to what the Justice Department does, even when it's acting most ethically. But they can't be trusted to prosecute a jaywalking ticket these days. And what the FBI did to Mike Lindell, Lindell filed a lawsuit. He alleges that he was on his way back from a hunting trip. He and his buddy pull into a Hardee's restaurant. An FBI car zooms in front of him. An FBI car zooms in back of him, and one comes up along the side. 3 FBI vehicles. And they effectively detained him for 45 minutes, objected to him calling his lawyer. He had to push hard on that. They finally relented. And what are they going after him over? Essentially First Amendment activity related to his disputing the outcome of the 2020 elections. First Amendment protected activity. Concocting charges about changing records or touching a computer or something. It's a complete boulder dash. So this is today's FBI. So it's not just about Trump. Others are being targeted and abused as well. The great Biden suppression and oppression. Speaking of Joe Biden had an interview with 60 Minutes earlier this week. I guess it was the beginning of the week. I don't know if we're going to get that clip. I'll pause here in case we were able to get it.
There's not a single thing that I've observed at all that would affect me or the United States relative to my son Hunter.
So there you see him denying any information, having any information about Hunter Biden. And I love the language he used. It was very specific and in an odd way. And he said, I didn't observe anything bad, right? That would be an issue for me or our national security. Well, I don't think anyone asked him about national security, right? And I don't think anyone necessarily asked him about him. And what's with this weird language about I didn't observe anything? So what he's saying is, don't call me as a witness, Justice Department, if indeed you eventually have to come up with some prosecution to make yourselves look good, while letting him get away with and letting me get away with other major crimes. So you have Biden admitting that, hey, I'm not a witness. I mean, that's how I interpreted that. But of course, he's heavily involved in this. So it's not only an effort to deflect, but also it's dishonest, because there's much evidence that Joe Biden was specifically involved in Hunter Biden's business dealings. Joe Biden, his brother, Joe Biden's brother, and Hunter, they were meeting with business associates both abroad and in the White House. There's other evidence suggesting that Biden was getting some of Hunter Biden's money, and Hunter Biden was giving him cash to help with personal expenses. And then you have the Tony Bobulinski information showing and witness testimony confirming that Joe Biden was the big guy in terms of 10% for the big guy. So Joe Biden's up to his neck in this RICO operation, this racketeering operation that had been run for sure out of the vice president's office. And they were obviously trying to make money after he became a private citizen again. And so the question is, what is the Justice Department doing? Now, they've supposedly been investigating Hunter Biden since at least 2019. They've had the laptop, sat on the laptop, suppressed the laptop since then. Supposedly there's a grand jury going on in Delaware, but if it's doing anything significant, I'm not aware of it. And I think we would be aware of it if it was. So what's going on? Nothing. And you're getting zero leadership out of the Republican leadership on the Hill about this corruption. There has to be a special counsel appointed under the rules. They've refused to. Garland's refused to. So I think, as I tweeted earlier this week, I think we can post that tweet. They had FBI agents swarm Mike Lindell while Hunter Biden gets to fly in Air Force One. That's the state of America today. And Joe gets to pretend there are no issues. Donald Trump had a special counsel appointed as a result of corruption by Mueller and gamesmanship by Mueller and company and illegal leaks of his FBI files. Here we have in-your-face evidence that the president's son is not only implicated in criminal activity, but that criminal activity may have benefited Joe Biden, and still no special counsel. And Joe Biden has the audacity to say that there's a threat to democracy. I don't even know what that means. I'm sure he doesn't either. But the threat to our constitutional republic is the idea that law enforcement is used to achieve solely political goals. And that's what's happening at the federal level. It's being used to target Trump and his supporters, and being used to protect Biden, Obama, Hillary, etc. I know Durham's supposedly out there, but he ain't doing much by any standard. We've done more than Durham to expose what's been going on. Not that he hasn't exposed some additional information. But woefully inadequate. And sure enough, Judicial Watch, we're just not stopping. And we just sued the Secret Service to uncover the alleged Secret Service intervention to help him evade some embarrassment, perhaps some legal liability, concerning the disposal of a gun Hunter owned. So we asked for these documents back in, I think, March of last year. So we give them forever to respond. And the Secret Service refused to give us documents about this big scandal. And it is a scandal. Hunter supposedly had a gun, and it got tossed into a dumpster by, I guess, his then girlfriend. And the Secret Service, it looks like, went to intervene to try to get records about the gun purchase. and you basically get them offline, more or less. And so we asked questions about that, and they refused to give us anything. We filed the lawsuit against DHS for records or communications about the reported purchase, possession, and disposal of a firearm owned by Hunter Biden found in a Delaware dumpster circa October 2018. And as I said, the allegation is that there was an intervention for Hunter by the Secret Service. And this is, I think, the woman who took the gun and put it in a dumpster was Hunter's dead brother's widow. And I think they had a relationship. So, it was just kind of terribly, unusual all around, to put it charitably. In last year, Politico reported Haley, who is the widow of Beau, took Hunter's gun and threw it in a trash can behind a grocery store, only to return later to find it gone. Delaware police began investigating, concerned that the trash can was across from a high school and that the missing gun could be used in a crime. According to law enforcement officials and a copy of the police report obtained by Politico. But a curious thing happened at the time. Secret Service agents approached the owner of the store where Hunter bought the gun and asked to take the paperwork involving the sale, according to two people, one of whom has firsthand knowledge of the episode, and the other was briefed by a Secret Service agent after the fact. Now, just so you know, the Secret Service doesn't have jurisdiction over guns or laws related to the guns. That's the ATF. It could be a state issue in the case of Delaware. But here you have the Secret Service, according to this report, intervene. Now, what's interesting is they could have come back to us and said, oh, look, we looked, Judicial Watch, we couldn't find any documents. We'd be suspicious of that, but that would suggest, oh, this isn't true, right? Nope. Instead, they've essentially ignored our request, which is why we're suing in federal court. So here we have a federal court lawsuit against a law enforcement agency who refuses to obey federal law on transparency. And it's not coincidental that the lack of transparency concerns Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, who's been caught up in so many scandals, I wouldn't have enough time in this entire day to tell you all about them. And as I note, the Secret Service and the Biden administration are in cover-up mode for Hunter Biden. Whether it's his laptop, his business practices and travel, or these documents related to the careless disposal of a gun in a dumpster near a high school, this administration continues to put up unlawful roadblocks to any effort to investigate the activities of the Biden family, particularly Hunter. Now, we've already uncovered through Foia, and this is during the, I guess our lawsuits and work began during the Trump administration on this. So we've already uncovered significant information that Hunter was a problem for the Obama administration, for example, with respect to his work in Ukraine, and I use the phrase work loosely, the scheme. You had Obama officials complaining about how Russia was making fun of and trolling Joe Biden on Ukraine corruption issues because he was coming to Ukraine just before, just at the end of the Obama administration, he went to Ukraine again to, quote, deal with corruption issues. And Russian state-linked media started making fun of him as it relates to Hunter and Burisma. And they said they're trolling him. And the State Department official in the Obama administration said Burisma is the gift that keeps on giving. He said sarcastically and obviously with some frustration. So we've already uncovered documents, but we haven't stopped with the documents we've already uncovered. I encourage you to go to our website to look at all the documents we've uncovered about Hunter Biden and how he was involved in an influence operation, his company, Burisma, how it's been tied to Hillary Clinton's people, all sorts of great information. And on top of that, the State Department, though, continues to withhold information about Hunter Biden. We asked for, quite directly, give us records about Hunter Biden. You know, if they're showing up in the files of the State Department, and these are important files. We're not saying, you know, we want a press clipping, but we want to know what the communications were among the diplomatic corps about Hunter Biden. And we've been getting the hand to the face. So we sued. We also sued again the Secret Service prior to this over his travel. Where has he been traveling? We had uncovered previously that Hunter Biden had been on, he had visited, I think, 29 countries with Secret Service protection. He had 5 trips, or there were 29 trips, foreign trips, 5 trips of which were to China. 1 trip was to Russia, and that was before he started keeping Secret Service protection. Now, since his father's been president, he obviously has had Secret Service protection, which, to be clear, is entirely appropriate. The president and his immediate family should get Secret Service protection. But the American people have a right to information about what that protection costs and where it's being given. And that's what they don't want to give to us. So why are they covering up for Hunter? Why? Because we're going to find out where he might have been and where he's been during his father's term as president. So there's a major scandal going on in addition to kind of these underlying issues we were concerned about, the Burisma dealings, his dealings with China, etc. You've got a cover-up of all of that happening right now. It's a cover-up. Now, I don't believe the cover-up's usually worse than the crime, but the cover-up can be a crime. Because usually people don't cover up something that isn't a crime. So in this case, though, we've got the Biden administration at the State Department and the Secret Service refusing to follow Foia law to protect Hunter Biden. So we have law breaking to protect the Biden family from information coming out about the scandals that Americans are concerned about. And it's up to Judicial Watch, and Judicial Watch isn't just complaining about it. We're in federal court trying to break through the stone wall, trying to smash the stone walls that the Biden administration is placing to keep this information from coming out about corruption issues that are tied directly to the President of the United States. And speaking of smashing through stone walls, Judicial Watch was able to obtain records about Nancy Pelosi's husband, who was arrested, and I think he pled out to some charges related to drunk driving in California. Now, what had happened was he was arrested in Napa, California in May of 2022, and we filed a Foia request. Others had filed public information requests as well, but there was a lot of stonewalling about the video of his interaction with the police during his arrest, and as we're always interested in, other documents documenting the arrest. So we were able to get on not only the video, but also the post-arrest records from the police department. And I don't want to overstate them, but they're interesting. I mean, he's the husband of the most powerful politician, one of the most powerful politicians in the country. She's third in line for the presidency. She's Speaker of the House, so she sets the agenda for the House of Representatives and practically speaking for Congress generally. So when her husband buys and sells stocks or gets arrested, it's public. There's a public interest in figuring out what went on. We were able to get the video, and we pulled together the highlights. I mean, some of the highlights include him invoking his wife's name, and doing that old-fashioned trick of showing the officer who arrested him the fact that he's a supporter for the local police charity. So here are some of the clips we were able to pull, and let me stop here and play them for you.
Right. No, I understand who you are, and I'm not here to try to do anything to
Okay, we'll do.
draw any negative attention to you. If you've been honest with me, there's really nothing that you should be worried about.
I'm up here by myself. My wife Nancy is back. There are no adults up here. My home is up here. I'm up here by myself because I drove up here today. My wife's back in the East Coast.
Discuss with my supervisor to see what he's willing to do. Just because we know you're a high profile person, so then I'll consult with him to see what he wants me to do at that point.
What about calling an Uber?
It's the same thing. You would be on your own after that. So, for our policy, we cannot do that.
Well, what the hell am I supposed to do? I mean, it's 1:45 in the morning.
Right.
I have no family up here within 60 miles.
Doesn't necessarily have to be a family member.
Like I
Well,
said,
who the hell can I call?
it could be an acquaintance, a family friend, as long as they're sober, willing to sign the paperwork and pick you
Well,
up.
I don't have anybody
And
like
that
that. I
would-
mean, we're talking
that
about
works
1
out.
o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Who am I going to call at Saturday night at 1 o'clock in the morning to come down here to Napa when I live in San Francisco?
Right. I understand where you're coming from your end, but from our end, this is the only way we can release somebody. I guess we're going to go, if you guys want to go ahead and gather your stuff, I'll go and call an appetite from the way.
Okay.
Sure, we've done everything we can to work with you, and now we're just dragging it out.
No, we're not drinking.
We are.
I have a driver
It's not
arriving
gonna
here.
work. Sure, it's not gonna work. From my captain's mouth to my ears, these drivers are not sufficient.
They're
It's
not
a hard no.
sufficient?
It's a hard no from my captain. It's a hard no.
May I speak with your captain, please?
No, because I've already hung up. We're not gonna go around in circles.
So you can see that, he said I'm a high-profile person. You see that he invoked Nancy Pelosi's name. You see, the officer is kind of pressured, and he said, well, I'll talk about it with my supervisor. So the officer was very polite and professional. And, poor Mr. Pelosi wanted to call an Uber, and obviously that wasn't going to work. So these clips are, I think, the fact is we had to beg for them and wait so long, to me, is a transparency issue. So in addition to the video material, we received some reports and email traffic after the fact. And there's nothing terribly outrageous in it other than, Mr. Pelosi, for obvious reasons, didn't want too many people to know about his arrest. So here you had him being arrested for, it seems to me, a relatively serious issue, because someone could have been seriously hurt. He could have been hurt, and someone else could have been hurt. And he was doing name dropping. So you got to wonder how often that type of activity is taking place in Pelosi world, where name dropping of Nancy Pelosi's name is used to get some, or an attempt to get some special treatment. And in this case, the only special treatment he seems to have gotten was a delay in the release of these videos. The plea deal, I guess, wasn't terribly unusual. So, look, I'm a believer that no one is above the law. But we should also remember, just because it's Paul Pelosi, he's not below the law. So it doesn't mean you throw the book at him in a situation where someone else wouldn't have thrown the book at him, would have had the book thrown at them. But look, Judicial Watch is out there just trying to get the information, so you can look at it and draw your own conclusions about how it was handled and how this reflects on Nancy Pelosi. So one of the more important activities or programs, for want of a better word, that Judicial Watch has been involved in since 2020 is a full-throated investigation, which includes litigation of the COVID mess. We've been investigating everything from how they came up with these lockdowns and the back and forth there. We've been investigating the origins of the virus. We've been investigating the vaccines. Everything that you could think to be investigated, we're trying to do it. And in many cases, we've actually gone to court to successfully, in key measures, get some of this information. So pretty much everything important we know about the vaccines has come out as a result of Judicial Watch. Everything important we know about the details of the origin of the virus and who knew what and when about it have come out thanks to Judicial Watch. And along the lines of that, we have just uncovered new documents that I think Americans are going to be upset about because they were hidden from Americans, and Judicial Watch fought and fought for them and got some new details on COVID-19 vaccine studies that were conducted in China. Yes, China. We had filed a lawsuit about the vaccine testing. Specifically, we were looking for biodistribution studies for the COVID-19 vaccines. Now, what is biodistribution? It's basically where does the vaccine go after it's injected. I think that's my non-scientific way of describing it. Now, they've described the vaccine previously when it first came out. Oh, don't worry, you get it shot in your arm and it gets it's pretty much over by the time it gets away from your arm and it doesn't really settle in too many places in the body. Well, it turns out that wasn't true, as uncovered in these biodistribution studies that Judicial Watch uncovered, where they were finding that the lipo nanoparticles, which is the delivery vehicle for the mRNA, those materials were showing up in animal studies in other organs, like the liver, right? Like the heart. And some of the documents describe these tests, and what was interesting is they withheld where the tests were given, or excuse me, where the studies were conducted of the rats and such. And we pushed and pushed, and we finally got the documents. And what was the basis for withholding the information? It was the confidential commercial information exemption. And so if a third party gives information to the government and it includes confidential business data, and someone asks for it through Foia, sometimes that confidential business data can be withheld from the public disclosure. Now, we objected in this case because we didn't think the data was confidential. I'm sure that I shouldn't say we objected. I'm confident that was our concern. So to make a long story short, information that previously had been kept secret was released to Judicial Watch. And essentially there are these studies, and you can see that Pfizer, and these are from the biotech Pfizer company, this is what this is. There's this little disclaimer here. This document contains confidential information belonging to biotech Pfizer, except as may be otherwise agreed to in writing. By accepting or reviewing these materials, you agree to hold such information in confidence and not to disclose it to others except when required by applicable law, nor to use it for unauthorized purposes. In the event of actual or suspected breach of this obligation, biotech Pfizer should be promptly notified. So it's labeled confidential. So you can see why we had difficulty getting this document. And so this is what the document looks like, and I'm sure we'll just pop it up on screen. So you see all these charts, and I'm not going to go through the data and such because I'm not prepared to do that. But on page 4, for instance, of this, they tell us where the study took place, and it says Shanghai, China. Now, for whatever reason, I wonder what that reason is, they didn't want us to know about it till now. Why were they concerned about it? Much of the rest of the document had been released. Why were they hiding where the study took place? Well, given the alleged origin of the virus, you can be sure why they didn't want us to know where the study took place. Is your confidence in the vaccine increased or decreased as a result of the fact that studies about its safety and efficacy were conducted in China? And I'm not saying you should answer that question one way or another. I'm just asking you. And you can bet the corrupt bureaucrats that run our national public health agencies They were worried, and that's why they withheld the information. But we got it out. They were also conducting studies in England. I guess that's not the end of the world, right? But this is information that we have a right to know. Look, as I've said before, the American people have a right to as much information as possible about the safety and efficacy and side effects and risks and benefits, you name it, about the COVID vaccine. This is the most important medical treatment in the history of modern man, for good and for bad, some might say, depending on your point of view. And so we are committed to getting this information out from the government. And Judicial Watch, the fact that Judicial Watch needed a federal lawsuit to find out that the vaccine or key components of the vaccine were tested back in China. By the way, it was in August of 2020. So this is after it became clear that, well, let's put it this way. It was after the virus emerged, obviously. So I just can't believe they tried to hide this. And the fact that they tried to hide it speaks volumes. And my comment in the release, which is worth sharing, the Biden administration's stonewalling and shell games about the COVID vaccines further undermine public confidence in these controversial drugs. Americans are now going to want to know, why did the Biden operation try to hide these COVID vaccine ties to China? I want to know. And you can bet we're going to be asking more questions. So once again, it's Judicial Watch to the rescue here in terms of getting basic information about these COVID vaccines that this awfully corrupt government doesn't want you to know. And let me just say this again. Again, another issue worth remembering. I complain about the deep state in the Justice Department. I complain about the deep state in the FBI, this sort of corruption here in our government at the federal level, where these agencies think they know better than the American people and don't think they are accountable to the American people. But don't you just think that it's just the FBI and Justice Department, the CDC, the FDA, NIH, Fauci's agency over at NIH, Fauci himself. They have as much contempt and arrogance for the American people's right to know and right to direct their own lives and right to direct their own government has any corrupt official at DOJ, any James Comey or John Brennan or people like that. I mean, Fauci's retiring in December, in large part, I would submit, because of work that Judicial Watch has uncovered, that it has exposed his dishonesty and corruption and questions even about his finances. So accountability is often a tough slog here in Washington, D.C., but it's essential if we're going to keep the republic. And I encourage you, if you like what you're seeing and hearing here, if you're tuning in because you saw us on MSNBC, for instance, or CNN as they're attacking us, I encourage you to find out more about this work by going to judicialwatch.org, sharing this video. That's something that really drives them crazy, that other people might see this. And also sharing these documents. Go and look at the documents yourself. You can look at the Pelosi videos. You can look at the documents about Hunter Biden that we've uncovered thus far. You can look at the documents about the COVID vaccine and the China virus, as it's been called. They're going to knock your socks off. You're worried about Bill Gates and China? You won't believe the documents we have. And what we have on Hunter Biden is unbelievable. And it's only Judicial Watch that it's not only asking these questions, but going to court to get them and then telling people about it. So find out about it. Find out what your government's up to. And if you like what we're doing, give us your support at judicialwatch.org, judicialwatch.org. And of course, we're all over the internet. And I encourage you to follow us wherever you are, on whatever social platform you are on, and because I think we're on them all too. So with that, I wish you the best, and I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.